Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Developers Roundtable meeting for today is September 22nd. My name is Michael Cadron. I am the Director of Community Development and appreciate all of your participation. Today for our agenda, we have presentations from city staff on a variety of topics. We're going to hear first from Chris Lehman and Ryan Beach about the sewer lateral retrofit program. Next, we'll hear from Teresa McClish, who's going to talk about our climate adaptation and safety element update. And I think that should be really interesting for folks. It's a brief presentation, but a lot of resources available online for you future-oriented folks to understand the city's plans as it relates to climate adaptation and what some of the vulnerabilities are, which was a big part of this project, is understanding what our vulnerabilities are for the future and working to address those. Next, Mike Lowe will talk about the 2023 building code update and give you a preview of what's going to be presented to the city council for adoption next month. And then he's also going to provide an update on some recent EnerGov enhancements, things that are in effect now, and some stuff to come as well. And then finally, we should have some time for your questions and a roundtable discussion, and I look forward to that as well. So with that, I know we don't really have a normal raise your hand feature, but under reactions, if you want to be recognized and ask questions, this is a great group where we've been able to just have free-flowing conversations in the past. And so if you sort of raise your hand or use one of those reaction methods, we'll be able to recognize you and respond to any questions that you might have as well. So thanks for being here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chris and Ryan to go ahead and start the first presentation.
Thank you, Michael. So to kick it off, do quick introductions. My name is Chris Lehman. I'm the Deputy Director of the Wastewater Division for the city. And also on the call with us is Ryan Beach. Ryan is the Wastewater Collection System Program Supervisor. And we have a few other people on the call as well that might be able to answer some specific questions. Miguel Barcenas is our Deputy Director of Engineering and Planning. And also on the call is our Utilities Director, Aaron Floyd. So we're going to step through the slides. We have about 22 to go through fairly quickly, hoping to have plenty of time for questions, but feel free to stop me if you have one specific to the slide. And Ryan's going to kick us off with a little bit of background about our collection system.
Yeah, so obviously from the first slide, this program was implemented January 1st, 2022. We've done a lot of work so far. So the city's wastewater collection system includes 148 miles of gravity mains, 2,900 manholes, 9 lift stations, and roughly 4 miles of force main. So the collection system has nearly 18 miles of pipe that is more than 75 years old, and the oldest pipe in the system is over 100 years old. So from that slide, super old system, a lot of maintenance. Surprisingly, some of that pipe, 75 years old to 100 years old, it's still working, and that's pretty much it. So since 2007, the city has invested approximately $33 million in upgrades to the collection system. Again, a lot of aging sewer, a lot of work out there. This is a picture of our Laguna lift station. So a lot of that money is going into new lift station construction and replacement. Next slide, please. So the city has invested approximately 1.3 million into the collection system. Again, into the lift station maintenance, hydro cleaning, CCTV inspection, and just day-to-day construction repairs to the system. So,
And to clarify, that 1.3 million is annually, that's our operating budget. The 33 is capital improvement projects. So thanks, Ryan. I'll take it back for a few slides. That leads us into our topic for today, which is the private sewer lateral program. And wanted to start with a little bit of background of how we ended up where we're at today. A lot of this is probably a refresher for most people on the call, but thought it was important to start with the origin of the program. So a lot of information on this slide, but it's essentially the program and the intent and the goals of the program are to prevent sanitary sewer overflows. And we have a series of permits that were issued by the water board that we have to maintain as far as treatment and conveyance. And then we have third parties like the California River Watch that are advocacy groups looking out for environmental protection. And this all started with actually in 2015 that we were issued a notice of a violation, and they intended to file a suit under the Clean Water Act against the city. And so series of negotiations, a lot of work working with Riverwatch, and we ended up with a settlement, and that is the foundation for the program as we have it today. Prior to this program, we had a voluntary private sewer lateral replacement program, and that was voluntary, no mandatory requirements. Moving forward from this settlement, we have instituted some mandatory requirements, and that has to do with ongoing maintenance and repair. It has to do with some assets that are provided on the city's website, full transparency of our budget, our plans moving forward, and then some requirements for development. And the quote there at the bottom is really what launched the program as we see it today, that city staff shall recommend to city council an ordinance establishing a program for inspection, repair, and replacement of private sewer laterals. And so some context, the city has over 100 miles of sewer mains under our authority and maintenance. On the private side, there is an equal amount of private infrastructure. Some dates leading up to the implementation of this program, a little bit of the background and study work that went into that. Everything resulted in an ordinance, which I'll get to on a following slide. And like Ryan mentioned, the effective date for these programs is January 1st, 2020. It's not too old. That's why we're hoping to revisit this presentation. And really today we're looking for feedback, questions, ideas on anything we can clarify and potentially make the program easier to implement for both sides. Everything that we're talking about today is referenced in our city municipal code, and there is a new section after 2020 that specifically speaks to private sewer laterals, and that is linked in the PowerPoint. Happy to follow up with any of these references at a later date, but we will get into some of the specifics of this chapter. And the first program we're going to talk about, really three elements of the private sewer lateral program. We're going to get into talking about rebates that are an incentive for private homeowners to replace their laterals that might be in poor condition. Second topic, we're going to talk about inspection requirements, and this is relating to inspection upon sale, upon a sale of a property. And then we'll end up talking about the offset requirements for development and intensification in what we call our capacity constrained basins. And those are areas throughout the system that we don't have any more room in the pipe for additional flow. And before we get into that, a couple of images here on the slide. trying to illustrate really the problem, the root of the problem, no pun intended. And as you're looking at the image on the left here, illustrating how a private sewer lateral ties into the city main. The issues that we have, there are several, but some of the issues with private sewer lateral failures relate to conditions of the pipe, and based on the type of material of the pipe, they can be more or less susceptible to root intrusion. So for instance, you get a crack or a failed joint in a clay pipe, easy spot for roots to get into the system. We have blockages from root intrusion. There's also, a series of other poor conditions here that are presented, but a lot of this is related to condition of the pipe, material of the pipe, and then we're seeing changing conditions over the past 10 years with drought and water conservation. And that is some observations we've seen in SLO and really statewide are lack of water, groundwater, the roots, they're seeking water, they're gonna go right into that sewer and they're gonna find the point of least entry, they're gonna go through the crack, and that's where you start to get some of the blockages. The upper right-hand image is a picture of a manhole. Manhole that's overflowing, and this is again the root of the problem, sanitary sewer overflows. And so you get a blockage in a private lateral. One, there's a big risk for the homeowner and the property owner that could back up into the home, could flood, present hazards to human health and property. But and then out in the sewer main, these are the events that we have that have overflows, and this is what we're trying to prevent, keeping the wastewater in the pipe, getting it to the wastewater plant where we can treat it properly. And with that, I got a couple more slides here. So what else is the city doing to address this problem? One is we use data. We use a lot of data to make decisions and planning for development. So taking a step back, more than 10 years ago, the city completed a system-wide flow study. And the graphic on the right is illustrating kind of the highlights of flows throughout various components of the system. And what we're doing with that flow study, two-year long data collection event, is we're monitoring flows throughout the system over the course of those 2 years. And really the intent is to identify capacity constrained sections of the system. And those are pictured here in the map with the fully filled bubble. And as it might seem by the graphic, we're just illustrating that during these high flow events, when we do get the additional rainwater in the system, there's literally no more room in the pipe. And that leads to the basis of our offset program, in that developers, homeowners wanting to put additional wastewater generation in the system, we need to find a way to offset that additional increased wastewater volume. And that leads to the offset program. So this study we completed, that resulted in a master plan for the collection system. And we call it the infrastructure renewal strategy. Just a different term for a master plan for the collection system. The city is getting ready in the next month to advertise an updated flow study. And so we'll take the data that we generated in this study, the hydraulic model of the system, and we're going to update it based on current conditions. And based on what we find, that will drive the direction of the program for the next 10 years. And I think I'm passing it back to you, Ryan. Or do I have one more?
I'll take over this slide, that's fine. So these are our capacity constrained areas. So from the map you guys saw, or the slide you guys saw before, it showed all the pretty much the whole system, the pipes with different amounts of flow. So we calculated all of this data, and we determined that these sections of collection system and sections of town are considered capacity constrained areas. So these are considered high risk during rain events for any construction or development within these areas. If you're trying to build a home or add an ADU, you may have to do an offset in these areas because we can't add any additional flow to the system in these areas. So next slide, please. So trying to just help the impacts to these areas and trying to limit the amount of I&I and root intrusion into our sewer mains, we chose to create the rebate program. So for a single home, or at least a single family resident in a capacity constrained area, we are giving a $3,000 rebate for the replacement of the lateral from the property to the city main. Then anyone outside the capacity constrained areas, we're giving a $2,000 rebate. Then also on top of that, we are waiving the Y fees. So when you go uptown, you pull your permits, we are not charging you a Y installation fee. So anytime you want to do work to your sewer lateral and you want to tie into the sewer main, we actually have wastewater collection staff come out, we cut into the main, we do that portion of work, and we don't charge the homeowner or the contractor for that Y installation or that work. So next slide. So here is a depiction of a sewer lateral, kind of goes over ownership. So from the home to the city main. So the city owns the sewer main. So that is the homeowner's responsibility from the house to the main. So anytime you're either doing work and you need to inspect prior to like adding an ADU or doing a home remodel, you're going to see my name on the permit. I'm going to ask you for a lateral inspection, and that's if we don't have any updated information on that sewer lateral. And I'm going to be looking for any defects to see if that lateral meets our current specs and standards. If it doesn't, I'm going to request that you guys either repair a certain section of that sewer lateral, or you're going to have to replace the entire sewer lateral from the home to the city main. So when is an inspection required? So anytime a property is sold within the city of San Luis, they are required to submit a video inspection. If we have up-to-date information on that sewer lateral, or if they've submitted an inspection within 5 years, we are not going to require that. Or if the lateral is, I believe, newer than 20 years. So it all depends on age. There's a couple factors. Not all properties have to submit it, but the majority of the homes have to submit a lateral inspection prior to the sale. So when is inspection not required? Like I said, if the property is less than 20 years old, if the property's sewer lateral was replaced within 20 years, and yeah, how long is the inspection valid? 5 years. So next slide. So we've had a lot of questions with common interest lately, mainly from realtors when they're selling properties within a common interest. So these areas, if you look on the map below, so you're going to see a sewer main that's in green on the left-hand side, and you're going to see a sewer main that is a tan on the right-hand side. The green sewer mains is a private sewer system, not maintained or owned by the city. And the main on the right, that's actually a city maintained and owned sewer main. So these properties do not need to submit an inspection for any work they're doing, or when the property sells, they have to do that in 2030. So that's pretty much it. So I believe we already went through this slide, Chris.
Thanks, Ryan. So brings us back to the third element of our private sewer lateral program, and we call it the offset program. So as Ryan was discussing, we have a capacity constrained map that is on the city's website. That's identified by the teal shaded portions of the map. We are getting ready to update this based on the results of this upcoming flow study that will update the map. It will give us the most current data of our hydraulic model of the system. The offset requirements, again, are related to capacity in these basins, that there's not enough room to safely convey the wastewater to the wastewater plant. And so on the website, we're not going to have time to get into much of the details, but everything stems back to the website and the resources that are posted there. And as far as how to calculate offsets that are required, that is listed in our 2020 engineering standards and specifications. And specifically page 241, I have a link here in the PowerPoint. We are getting ready to update those standards with the 2022 edition. And that we'll provide that link and updated resource when we get it. So just the metrics here and some numbers in that high level, about 17 gallons of infiltration and intrusion benefits from replacing 1 foot of private sewer lateral. So those are some of the numbers we're playing with. Within our municipal code, we have some guidance on calculating factors for your offset. Here's an example of that. This is on the city's website as well, municipal code, chapter 13. How do you know what offsets are available to replace? And you have a development or an expansion project that you want to pursue, you need to find an offset. A tool that the city has put together and provided is our private sewer lateral portal. And this is a real-time map of the latest conditions that the city has. As we get updated conditions, this map will update in real time. And as illustrated by this map, you can see green conditions. Green sewer laterals are assumed to be in good operating order. A lot of this stems back to the type of material of the sewer lateral. And so we know we have major issues with clay pipe, and a good portion of our sewer laterals are still clay pipe. And those are the laterals that we end up having issues with the joint failure, and we get roots in the joints. And so go on the city's website, you can view this again in real time. And this is a tool that was implemented to help find offsets in these basins that require offsets for development and intensification. Other things the city is doing. So right now, we have made headway in reducing infiltration and intrusion throughout the system. Still have a major problem. One of the methods of attacking and addressing that additional flow is back at the water resource recovery facility. at 35 Prado Road. So this is the city's wastewater plant. Currently in a 4-year long, $150 million capital improvement upgrade. And a portion of that upgrade is to expand what you see here in the picture, very recent picture, is we've expanded our, we call it an equalization pond. And this pond, it accommodates those surge flows that we see during a rain event. And so where we might normally see 3 million gallons of wastewater a day at the wastewater plant, we might see upwards of 15 million gallons during a rain event. And that is not due to a direct flow of the rainwater. We have a separate stormwater system. That is from all the additional defects in the system. So we're getting rainwater into the sewer and we have to treat it. And so without sizing the plant at that 15 million gallons, we need to find some way to accommodate that peak flow. And this has been the strategy to date. This basin was previously sized at 4 million gallons. As a part of this upgrade, we've expanded it to 8.5 million gallons. And part of that prediction and modeling is based on 100-year storm flow events. So it's a risk management strategy, but all centered back around this infiltration and intrusion that we're getting largely through the private defects in the private lateral system. So if anybody's interested in learning more about that project, we do have a link here to the project website, SLO WRRF project.org. And we have one final slide that Ryan wanted to present, not related to the lateral program, but perhaps equally important for the homeowner to consider.
Yeah, so we just wanted to touch on backwater devices. So anytime you guys are replacing or repairing a sewer lateral at a property, just make sure it has a backwater device attached to it. It's part of the plumbing code, and it's also in the city muni code and our specs and standards. We've seen a rise of damages occurred by sewer blockages. It could be from roots, it could be from I&I events. And if a property does not have a backwater device installed on the sewer lateral, essentially it's going to back up in the house and cause some serious damage. The city is not going to, depending on the issue, the city is not going to cover those damages because, again, that is on the California Plumbing Code and it's in our specs and standards. So just keep an eye out. If you're building new properties, just make sure the backwater device is installed if it meets this criteria. So.
And with that, that's the end of the slides we have prepared, but we're happy to take any questions. If you think of anything after the fact or want to follow up with more specific conversation, feel free to reach out to Ryan or myself. And we'll turn it back to you, Michael, for any questions.
Chris, this is Miguel with the Utilities Department. Every time you talk, there's a transcript at the bottom, and I think it typed in billion. So I just want to correct that. It's million. It's 140 million, not billion.
Good clarification. Thank you, Miguel. So Michael, I can't see if there's any questions, but again, feel free to reach out to Ryan or myself. We're happy to follow up with any questions.
I have a question. Michael, we can't hear you.
Yeah, Michael, you're muted or somehow your microphone is not picking up. No.
Okay, so we don't have.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, now we do. Yep.
No.
Yes, we hear you, Michael.
Sorry, let me adjust my speaker setting real quick here. Somebody can speak. I'll
How's that, Michael?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Aaron.
I had some questions on the sewer, if it's okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Steve.
All right. Sorry I was late. Steve Ross, Montage Development. So one of my first questions was, we do building, new construction. So if something has a planning approval, we're looking at a property on Tank Farm, 600 Tank Farm. Does that mean that there's adequate sewer if it's been approved, or do we still have to dig deeper to understand the sewer capacity issues?
Take that, Chris. If it's not in the capacity constrained area, then that means that there's no mitigation that's required for an offset. So 600 Tank Farm is not in the capacity constrained area.
Oh, it was hard to read the map. So, okay, that's very helpful. Secondly, I agree with everything you're doing. I did have a comment as far as other departments within the city that they know this program. Oftentimes we get into an issue with putting in our trees with the arborist, and then they want a lot of trees, and I don't like to put them near anything that has water. So we always have this, I can't remember what their requirements are, but it's always a conflict at every single project. So I think it would be helpful if we have good relationships with the city, but if you could coordinate with the other department, I think that would be very helpful.
That's a good point. Again, Miguel Barcenas with utilities. In our uniform design criteria, the one that Chris referenced, this is part of our 2020 engineering standards. Under section 6, I believe there's a requirement of providing 10 foot of separation away from the sewer lateral. And then when we get the landscaping plans, irrigation and the planting plans, we try to encourage that they show the underground utilities just on the backdrop so that we were able to make that connection and coordination.
Yeah, Miguel, I think you're spot on. We're familiar with that. It's just oftentimes we get comments and corrections from other departments. So we have to reference your own code. Anyway, that's why I made reference to sharing. And then lastly, I really wasn't aware of how much infiltration is happening. So I was wondering with the rebate program, if that's incentive enough, or because it's such a large problem, would the city want to entertain doing the repairs and then, charging their respective homeowners? Because it looks like it's a pretty big problem.
I can take that one if you want.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Aaron Floyd, Utilities Director. And Stephen, I think that's a good question. There's two parts right there. We are contemplating whether the current $3,000 that we have allotted for those laterals in the capacity constrained areas and the 2,000 not in that is adequate given the current inflation and construction costs on that. At this point, though, we do foresee keeping the construction of this within the private sector. If the city has to pick that up, then we're forced into probably different contracts and labor negotiations, and we can probably see a pretty significant price escalation in the overall project if the city actually picks those projects up and handles them. So being that this is private infrastructure, it'll, in the foreseeable future, at least most likely stay on the private side.
All right, thanks for the question, Steve. Move over to Emily.
Yeah, I guess quick question from the planning side perspective, if there's any contemplation of the interaction between SB9 densities and the capacity constraints, if that was somehow going to limit SB9 eligibility in those areas, or if they're being treated the same as the capacity offsets would achieve the needed results in order to proceed forward with SB9 subdivisions or urban lots or second primaries in those areas.
Yeah, so I can take a stab at that, and then my utilities friends can correct me if anything is incorrect here, but SB9 projects would be treated the same as any other development. ADUs, accessory dwelling units, might be a good corollary. We do require offsets for new ADUs. So basically anything that's going to increase flow into the system that's in a capacity constrained area would first need to accomplish the offset before the building permit would be issued. Okay, well, thanks for your questions and engagement, and thanks to the utilities team for the presentation on that item. And at this point, I will ask Teresa McClish to screen share, and we can jump into the next discussion item, which is the general plan, climate adaptation and safety elements. So it is, it's no longer called the safety element. It has a bigger scope than that. And you can start the presentation if you want, Teresa. We're seeing your PowerPoint, but if you want to actually go ahead and start the presentation mode, then we'll just see the slides.
I would love to. I would love to. I have to apologize, everybody. My PowerPoint is frozen, and so I can move my slides. And
okay,
happy to talk to you, but it's just not going to be in presentation mode. I just got off with IT, and we tried to fix it, but for some reason it's stuck. So
it's fine. Thanks.
Anyway, yes, this is an update to the city's general plan. One of the required elements is a safety element, and as Michael mentioned, this is not your conventional safety element. Very intentionally, the reasons are, the state is prudently telling cities you have to consider climate impacts and climate adaptation when you're making policy for the city and for the city's safety. And the city itself has certainly strong climate-related policies and safety-related policies where we want to be well prepared as we go into a more uncertain future in regards to climate impacts. So it's been quite an interesting project to work on so far. We kicked this off in the summer of 2020, and you all remember it, or you're trying not to, but we were a hole up, and we had a pandemic on our hands. We had wildfire smoke, we had heat events, we had civic protests going on. We just updated our climate action plan all at once. So it was an interesting time to go out and start surveying the community about what they were concerned about related to community resiliency. And we did do that. We started surveying folks, and you'll see some interesting results in that in just a moment. So there's several state guidelines and requirements that have been instrumental in guiding our project. We started off with a Caltrans climate adaptation grant to do some of the technical work and community survey work. And we use a state guide to help us along. And there's basically 4 steps where we conduct, some baseline, obviously some baseline assessments. Then we look at different climate hazards and what those impacts are specific to San Luis Obispo and where our vulnerabilities are. And then we start thinking about what we can do to, in advance and proactively make sure that we're as prepared as possible to adapt to those that are inevitable and coming our way, and then put it into policy. And that's where we are right now. So the main Senate bill that drove this is Senate Bill 379, and the climate adaptation grant was very instrumental. It was over $400,000 to help us do the technical modeling, and to help us assess and make sure we had really good data-driven basis for policy. We are able to use the best available science and practices, and we were able to work with our local government commission, now Civic Well, who helped us tremendously in terms of trying to assess the best ways to strengthen community resiliency. A big part of this also is as regards environmental justice. Environmental justice is also an element that of the general plan that is that the state is in some cases requiring communities to insert into their general plan. And so we are inserting it into our safety element, and many people are. And it really, it was pervasive through this process, and how important environmental justice is in looking at our disadvantaged communities, and making sure that we were inclusive and equitable in terms of what we're proposing. This is just a glimpse of the team that prepared the technical reports. Again, working with the Local Government Commission, Ascent, Fair and Peers, really looking hard at evacuation considerations in our transportation and circulation of the city, CBEC for our flooding impacts, and we worked with Cal Poly as well. Here's our first survey. This is way back at the very beginning of the project, and you can see high concerns with wildfire smoke, which probably wouldn't have been as evident prior to that. But that still has remained a very big concern, as well as what we're going to be doing to be resilient in increasingly hotter times, and how we're going to deal with the whiplash events that we're expecting to occur over the next decades. So we took the baseline conditions report, we took a lot of community input, and that went into a climate change hazards and vulnerabilities report. And this is where we really looked at where we are as a community, where we are vulnerable as a community, where our facilities are vulnerable, where our buildings are vulnerable. And we put it, that's identified and elaborated on in this technical report. And you can find this online. I'll give you the website at the end of the presentation. But we took information per hazard area, wildfire, flood events, heat events, and we looked at different systems, our natural systems, our built environment, in our community as a whole, and how we relate to one another. And all those were factored into this vulnerability assessment, as well as our for the purposes of environmental justice. So I'll just run through a couple slides, not talking about how hot it's going to get, but that is just going to get hotter. Certainly around us the communities around us are going to really see bigger increases, but that will also affect us. And we took a look at, for example, on the slide, what does that mean in terms of our building stock? Well, our building stock, most of it was built prior to 1989, and we're not necessarily well stocked with air conditioning. So that's recognized, one of the many things recognized in the report. Our safety element will not delve in too much on drought, because we have a whole nother chapter in our general plan for water resources, and that includes drought considerations. But it was factored in certainly in terms of this whiplash and sort of the extreme events we'll likely see going forward in time, and these kind of pervasive future events, including drought for our area. Wildfire certainly considered as is wildfire smoke in particular, and how that will affect our sensitive populations, how that impacts our tourism and business communities, and those are also identified and elaborated on in the report. Flooding, you are all very familiar with, historic flooding and how that is used to inform building practices. Well, we looked forward decades and then again, decades and decades into the future, and what we may be seeing based on rapidly developing climate models, and mapped them. And so we can see, you know, again, we'll probably see a very prolonged drought events, but the flooding events may be more concerning. And we have an analysis of likely flood scenarios in the report, and exemplified by several mapping exercises that we're using to inform our policies going forward. And then again, we looked around about what folks are doing, what, you know, what's developing in this area in terms of adaptation, and those are built in. We have some adaptation booklet to generate ideas, and we're using those ideas in conjunction with the information we've gathered to inform our what we want to do about this. What should our policies be going forward? And again, very specific and very intentional for environmental justice. We used new information from the San Luis Obispo Council of Governments. They did a study for disadvantaged communities in San Luis Obispo, mapped those. We mapped our hazard areas and overlaid those maps with our hazard areas, so we can really see how that may disproportionately affect disadvantaged communities in the city. And again, I mentioned before that, you know, there's certain statutes and passed in the last few years that we're paying attention to in our safety element. You know, just this example on this slide is SB 99, making sure that every city has has policies to require 2 points of access for every neighborhood. This is one of several laws we're making sure we're adhering to in this effort.
Teresa, I apologize for the interruption. I just want to give you a time check and make sure that we're able to get some questions from the group and then get on to the additional presentation. So maybe just a couple more minutes of summary, and then we can see if there's questions from the group.
Great. Well, I can wrap it up right here. It's here's our, you know, we're preparing our draft climate adaptation and safety element. This will include the policies and programs that we would like to advance over time. This should be out at the end of October. Really looking forward to bringing it to Planning Commission for a workshop at the end of October, and then again in December before heading to City Council after the first of the year. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Right, perfect. Well, thank you. And just open it up to the group to see if you all have any questions about our work in this area and how it might, you know, impact your projects going forward, or things that you need to think about in the future as it relates to climate adaptation and safety. And if you can stop screen sharing, Teresa, then we'll bring it back to the group. Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, on page 3, Teresa, there were made reference to the slide like capacity building. I didn't really understand what that meant.
Sure. Capacity building was an effort and scoped specifically in the grant to increase our capacity as a community, as well as increasing our capacity as an organization to be able to make sure we are well educated, we're getting the word out, we're working with our regional partners, the county, Caltrans, other agencies to make sure together we have the tools in place to deal with situations as they arise over time.
Got it. I was thinking like building is in development. That's why I was asking, because I thought like you were looking for density or something. So
But it's not pipe capacity like we just heard, right? It's different.
Okay. All right,
It's really about resiliency, right? And our ability to recover in the case of a future, extreme weather and wildfire, all those issue areas are things that we are going to face in the future. So how are we as a community going to be resilient and give our community members, our residents and visitors and property owners and everybody the ability to recover from those events in a way that helps them move forward, get beyond it and move forward. And we've seen communities across the United States fare better or worse after these kinds of events based on how prepared they were. And so this is it's a state planning effort. Of course, we got a major grant from Caltrans, and a lot of other communities had access to that type of resource. And so hopefully all together, we'll be better prepared when those events arise. And it's not a matter of if, but when. I think we're all pretty aware of that. Any other questions from the group?
Michael, I'll just mention I'm Andy with the Air District, and Teresa, thank you for the presentation. We really look forward to taking a look at the climate adaptation and safety element draft. We've got some good ideas. Looking forward to seeing if those are already into the plan, but look forward to working with you on the comments that we do have.
Great, sounds good. Thank you, Andy.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. So with that, I think, thank you very much, Teresa. Appreciate that information, and we'll turn it over to Mike Lowe. Mike Lowe is our deputy building official. I think most of you have had the opportunity to meet him at this point. And he is going to take it over and give us a presentation on what's happening in building and safety.
All right, can you guys see that presentation up there?
We sure can.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure I'm sharing the correct screen. All right, so last time I had the opportunity to speak with you, I made some pretty big high-level promises about just how we're advancing some technology in the building safety division, whether it be through software changes, access to records online, and then also just advancements in how we issue permits. And so today in this presentation, I kind of want to go through some of the progress that we've made and just give to this group some actual tangible points that we've excelled on. And so the first thing that I'm going to mention is how we're moving towards the digital plan platform. We've procured the necessary infrastructure and technology so that we can look up plans digitally, be able to access plans. And we're currently in the process of working with a outside consulting agency that will help us scan a number of documents. I think total we have somewhere around 30,000 documents to scan, and that's just with active projects and address files. And then we also have a number of backlog plans as well. What this will look like in the interim is, and this is going to be probably effective during the month of November, our final review comments during the permit process will be to provide us with a digital version of your plan set. And so what we'll do then is take either a CD-ROM or a flash drive. We'll upload that into our system. We'll give it a digital stamp and then also be able to provide that back to whoever is receiving the permit at that time as well. So you'll be able to have a digital copy. I know that a lot of architect firms, once they get the stamp set, they go through their own scanning process. And so if we're going to try to eliminate that from our business process, we want to be able to help developers out with that as well. Now, of course, once we get into e-reviews, we'll be receiving all plans digitally. And so that interim process will be able to go away. The other big announcement to make is we've officially launched a solar app, and that was as of Tuesday of this week. It includes standalone solar systems as well as solar systems that include energy storage systems. But it does have some limitations. It's limited to residential systems that are less than 10 kilowatts. And it does not process energy storage systems standalone. However, in case you're not familiar with what this process is, essentially SolarApp is a company that created a automated review process for solar systems. And so you can put in all your inputs and then it will verify it through their software. And then once you get that verification form, you submit it through our online process, and we're able to configure our system to instantly produce a permit. And just to go through here real quick, I can show you. I'll pull over here. Just making sure you guys can still see the screen. Yeah, thumb up. Okay, so this is our new website. This is where you would find the information for solar installations. There's links on here that will take you to SolarApp where you'll have to register, where you'll be able to submit your projects, and then also instructions in here on how to submit through our system. Once you get into your system, and I'm now switching screens over to there. Just running through some of these projects. So this is kind of what your dashboard looks like after you've submitted it, after it's been issued. You do have the option here in the right-hand corner where you can actually print your permit. And so this is what you'll be able to have that shows your project description, the address that you paid your fees, just like you would have picked up at the front counter. And then in the field, inspectors will be giving a actual sheet. So it will replace what would normally be a permit card that they sign off on. Inspectors will bring that in the field, fill it out with the appropriate information, and then give that to either the contractor, homeowner, or whomever they're meeting with for the inspection to just demonstrate that it meets compliance. Of course, we'll sign off on the system, but we also want to be able to produce a paper record for whoever it is that's pulled the permit. So in case something does get lost in the world of computers, you guys have that paper document to hang your hat on. So let me just get back to the presentation here. Okay. So the exciting thing about this is that having configured it into our system, it now creates the template we need to configure other instant permits. And so working with our IT department, I anticipate that in the next 3 weeks, we'll be able to go live with electrical panel upgrades, a standalone permit for that. And so this could be something where maybe you're doing a renovation to a project, you know that you're going to be updating your electrical panel with that renovation. And while it's going through the longer review process, maybe you want to go online and get yourself an electrical panel upgrade permit. The only caveat is you won't be able to relocate the panel with this permit, the instant one, but you will have access to a series or a number of individual permits that you can automatically get issued online. With our InterGov system, where we've launched the online process, and many of you are using it to now schedule your inspections. One of the roadblocks or barriers that we ran into is that over the years of using InterGov, we've had a number of contacts for single or individuals. And so there could be somebody who does a number of projects in a given year. And each time they come in for an application, there's a new contact for them created. And so we have 7 or 8 cases where there are 15 or 20 contacts for a given individual. And as a result, we've had to create a policy on how we're going to function with these user interfaces, as well as with staff having to put them in on the behind the scenes work of the system as well. And so what that'll look like is when you're coming in for an application or submitting an application, we're going to have a CSS account or someone who's created an account as a contact for every application. Now that if you're doing it as a contractor, but the owner is pulling it, then it will need to be the owner who creates an account and has that as well. But it could also be an agent, it could be a contractor, design professional, whomever. We can add multiple contacts to any given permit, but we must have at least an individual. We also had in there company contacts, and those will not be able to be used to apply for and get a permit, but we will allow company contacts to be used for the purposes of scheduling inspections. And so a good example of this might be if a contractor has a crew of 4 or 5 superintendents, maybe that contractor is the lead on working with us at the city. And so he or she would come in, have their contact put on the permit, and then also add their company contact so that any one of their superintendents can access that particular project through the online system to schedule. With this, we also have created an opportunity for you guys to communicate with us. When you create an online account, it doesn't automatically add your projects to it. And so on our website, we have this form that will need to get filled out. And this form is basically just a process for you to communicate to us which permits or which projects are associated with your account. And so you can add as many permit numbers to this form. It gets sent in automatically to our admin staff, and they're able to go into the system and add your specific projects to your account. All right. So moving on here, and this will actually be another demonstration. Don't have a slide for it, but we are changing how we produce our inspection records. So currently we have a paper document that sits in the field, and oftentimes many of the notes that go into our computer system say, see back of inspection card. And so with the new system, one of my goals is to produce a digital permit card. And we've been able to configure our system to at least resemble that. And so this is actually our development site. So this isn't live just yet, but I'm going to give you just a quick demonstration of what it'll look like. When you're in your account, or not even when you're in your account, just even when you're accessing it from the public, you're going to be able to go into your project and click on inspections. And this is where you'll see the different types of inspection categories. They're oftentimes not going to be closed until the end of the project, but you're going to have the option to click on specific inspections and find a checklist. And then you're going to bring up what's going to now be a digital record and inspection card. This is going to be, and actually is already available on all projects. It's just that we haven't changed our business process to use it in this way just yet. So this in the next 2 weeks or so should be a feature that's available on all new and active projects. But basically what you see here is just, it's going to be maybe you'll have like 3 things that are being looked at with a framing inspection and 2 of them pass. Well, that could be indicated here in comments. We'll be able to change that specific inspection to yes, it's passed. And then maybe there was a couple of items that needed to be corrected. That will be captured there as well. And so your list of things that have been passed and where work can be moving forward will be listed there, as well as the deficiencies that need to be corrected. And we're hoping that by making this information available to the public, it's going to clear up some of the other concerns that we've received when we've heard that, the information that's shown is that it's either a partial pass or it's a failed inspection. And so maybe a potential home buyer watching the progress of their newly constructed home, they're getting a little concerned about, inspections not passing. us being able to open this up gives all that information and shows, oh, actually, no, these corrections are being made. These inspections are being completed. All right, so that's the end of my business process presentation. Before I get into code adoption discussions, are there any questions about that? Yeah, Lala, you got something to contribute?
My feedback is that it's working well. I think the work that you've done has been outstanding. The feedback I get from my team is this is really getting to a level that's it's very helpful. So I appreciate all the hard work. Great,
thanks. Lala, I don't know if you were trying to communicate, but we see your hand up. We couldn't hear you even when you had your microphone off. I think John, you were next.
Yeah, so I want to echo what Steve's saying. It is working a lot better, and you've made pretty good substantial change so far, and we all appreciate that. Are you guys going to be posting instructions for how to use these systems, either YouTube videos or something on the website? That may be super helpful, just because it's a hard adoption process, you know?
Yeah, is there something in particular? I do believe that we have, and let me just jump over to our info slow. If you go to just this info slow page, we do have a how-to. And so that's where you find the add contact to permit, that form that I brought up. And there's also there's a video on how to schedule inspections, and then also a number of user guides. So if this is new information to you, definitely jump in and look at it. But if there's something on there that's maybe missing or more that we can add to this section, I would appreciate that feedback as well.
Cool, perfect, thank you.
Yeah. All right, and Linda?
Hi, Lindy Hatcher, HBA. Can you put the staff person's name that's working on the project under that list where you had who is where you had what stage you're at in the process? Could you put the staff's name by that so we would know who to contact?
Are you talking about during the workflow for a project? Maybe.
Yes, you had
when it's during the review phase.
Yes, you had a slide up that had the different stages, and they were ranked like 1 through 10. And I'm wondering, could you put the staff person's name that's working on that particular segment of the approval?
Yeah, I can see it. Let me go back here real quick. So I think that it's in this area that you normally see it. Trying to find the actual one that you had, but oh, I don't think I'm sharing. Okay, am I sharing now? Sorry about that. Okay, so I think that on this workflow, usually there'll be like certain departments, whichever ones are in the review process and which are left. I can see it on my side, and I know that it's not public currently. I think that it's the only thing that's public is the actual department. I need to check with IT whether that individual assignment can be published or not. And then I'll need to also discuss internally with Michael if that's going to be part of our business process of furnishing that information. But as I think that I was talking to John about our website, sorry, trying to get back here. I don't think that the screen was up. I don't think I was sharing when I was talking to John, but this is where the how-to is with all the information. If you go to InfoSlow.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Would you be able to go back to that contact form? I heard from Lala that we just wanted to highlight that it's important when submitting that contact form to specify what kind of permit it is. So it's not just the permit number, but if it's a building permit, BLDG, fire, etc. Also, she wanted to share that we are in the process of creating a more in-depth how-to document for scheduling inspections on the portal. So that'll be available to our customers soon as well.
Great. Okay, well, then I'll go ahead and move into the next segment of my presentation, which is on code adoption. Now, there are going to be kind of two parts to this process, and I see I've got a few minutes left, so I'll try to make this quick. The first part is the municipal code part, the part that we're in charge of, and so it's our local specific amendments. But then there's also the state part where we really don't have a say in, and regardless of what we amend in the code, effective January 1st, 2023. It's the new code, it's the new law of the land. And so because of that, I say it's somewhat ceremonial to go through the code adoption process, but really from a legal and municipal standpoint, it is necessary to give us the authority necessary to enforce the codes. The amendments that we have must be more restrictive. We don't need to provide justifications for anything that affects our business process or the administrative sections. Most of our amendments for that reason are in Chapter 1 of the codes, but then anything that we do alter a building standard, we do provide a justification based on local climatic, topographical, or geological conditions. The current schedule is for this to go before council for approval on November 1st. And as I mentioned before, it'll be applicable to any new applications that come in after January 1. That is out of order. Well, let's do this. Let me go back here a slide, and let me just say that the majority of the changes that are going to be proposed are more structural changes to the actual municipal code. And so looking at where we are right now with Title 15, when you go into 15.02, we have this basically one large paragraph that kind of just lists all the codes that we're adopting. And as an outsider of the community coming in, it was really easy for me to identify ways where we can maybe provide a little more clarity. And so basically the new structure of the code will look something a little more like this, where we'll have a specific section that adopts a specific individual code, and then give anyone who's reading it the specific information that they need about that code. And so where you'll need to find the amendments for the code will be listed in this section, which model code it is based on, and that's in case you need to access commentaries for the code, and then the specific appendices that we will be adopting with the code. And so we kind of had a little bit of a reverse process before, where we just adopted the code and then went through and deleted the appendices that we didn't want. So we'll be just, instead of doing that, adopting the specific ones, listing it all here, and then having an actual section for each code. So building code will be 0.02 and correlate to part 2. Residential standards will be 0.025 and correlate to part 2.5, and so on and so forth. So more of a structural change than actual change with the content. The other part with that is we'll be producing a matrix. And so this matrix is going to break down and have every single amendment that we have, where you'll find it in the municipal code, which section it correlates to in the actual model code, and then a description of what it is, whether it's new to the code, whether it's an addition, amendment, deletion, and then it's assigned finding as well. And so while I have this Excel spreadsheet up, I'll just take a minute to go through a couple of the changes. It's really just a cleanup phase. You know, there are a number of areas in the code that have blanks where we were supposed to fill in. And so some of the new additions are going to just be, we're just adding our name into the code. The most significant one that was actually listed by the state is that permits are no longer expired after 6 months, but 12 months. And so we're just updating our municipal code to reflect that as well. And this was actually a change that came mid-cycle. And I suspect due to supply chain issues from COVID, that just giving builders a little more time on projects are going to help them out a little bit. And then again, changing a couple of language. This is where we've already had a fee, but it was previously identified as a handicap board of appeals. We're taking that word out to be a little more inclusive and add the word access instead. And then this is probably the biggest change to the building code. Currently, we have the amendment in 903.2 that requires all buildings to be sprinklered with a few exceptions. And what we're doing in that municipal code section is actually deleting the code and putting our code in instead. And so the problem with that is when we delete that code, we actually limit some of our ability to enforce what's called fire areas. And while that might not be applicable on any new projects, fire areas might be applicable on a building that maybe we annex in that doesn't have sprinklers. Maybe it's applicable on an older building that doesn't yet have sprinklers and does not have to add a sprinkler system. And so just merely shifting this code section and widening our ability to enforce other codes and standards. There are some more significant changes to the fire code. A couple of things here that I have listed, but with Roger on the line, I'm going to go ahead and give him a couple of minutes to just maybe run through what that looks like.
Thank you, Mike. Again, this is Roger Maggio, Fire Marshal, Chief Building Official. We only have a couple of local amendments as they're posted here, and they're non-building related. They're basically delegating more authority to the chief to control certain areas and parking along roadways during hazardous fire conditions. Gives him the authority to designate some wildland areas as hazardous fire areas and provide more control for elimination of smoking and campfires, ignition sources, and even entry into some areas that could be a critical fire danger, and temporarily post some roadways as no parking when access to those areas for increased risk is forecasted. That can be a wind event, a landslide, fire, or any other kind of public foreseen emergency. But there are some significant changes that are added to the fire code regarding for fire safety by the state, and includes the addition of an entire chapter that regulates the storage of distilled spirits and wine, which is proliferate in our area. We've had quite a few applications for wine storage warehouse, distilled spirits, and includes a lot more building provisions within the fire code, including ventilation and secondary containment trenching. There's also requirements for in your fire safety during construction, including the addition of site safety directors that are properly trained, fire watch that is properly trained, specifically dealing with wood frame construction, where that construction would be within 30 feet of a property line. So a lot of issues with, we've had implemented similar policies to construction downtown because of the increased risk already. So we've been working with our development community on making sure that their projects can be built safely without threatening existing infrastructure or buildings. There are some significant changes coming in the form of R337 in the residential code and Chapter 7A with regards to ignition resistant construction. And the biggest change is of attic and subfloor venting. Whereas we currently require ember resistance vents, and that would include steel mesh with no larger openings than 1/8 of an inch. The new code requires it to be able to resist not only embers, but direct flame impingement or radiant heat, which are looking more at the vents that are specifically designed for wild and urban interface areas. So we'll be looking more into that. There's also requirements in the fire code for fire protection plans for new subdivisions, which we've had implemented on a discretionary basis during the planning application, but they're now going to be ministerial in the fire code. So those are some things I'll be working with the development community on as applications get submitted. So that about sums it up for fire code. Any questions?
Okay, I do have some time for questions still at the end too, but I wanted to segue into a few of my significant changes, and these are not amendments, but these are actual code changes. And before I get into it, and I know we always probably around here get hit with energy code changes, but I do want to point out that 3C Ren is offering a numbering of building specific trainings beginning next month. And if you just go to their website and you'll see, I believe it's starting on, October 6th is when you'll start to see like 2022 energy code trainings. And that runs all the way through to December 1st. So they have ADU specific ones. And then they even get into single family projects, multifamily projects, and non-residential. And so they have a number of trainings coming. And then also there's a number of resources available through energycodeace.com, where they produce pamphlets that will break down all the new additions. And you can just go on their website, download them. They're very helpful. They're helpful for me to even create this presentation. I will say that the most significant changes have to do with constructing electric ready buildings and homes. I'll get to that here a little bit more. The biggest change that I can identify is in non-residential now having prescriptive requirements for solar panels as well as energy storage systems. The size of the system is based on certain equations. Just to give you an example, there's a table that's in the energy code. It will say specifically based on your area and based on your type of use, what factor you'll use in those equations. And so for an example, 10,000 square foot retail space, conditioned resale, 10,000 square feet of conditioned space for retail would have a factor of 2.91 in our area. And as a result, you'd have to have a solar system of 29.1 kilowatts. Now, there is another method to calculate it, and it's based on what they're calling now SARA, or solar access roof area. And that basically says you need to have 14 watts per square foot. So maybe your retail space is spread out over 4 stories and you have a limited roof space. And of that 2,500 square foot roof space, only 1,500 square feet are within this solar access roof area. And so if that's the case, your calculation would be different, and maybe you would only need a 21 kilowatt system. So there gives you 2 different methods to calculate the size of the system, and then how you would install that. And then in terms of energy storage systems, the capacity and power capacity, the energy capacity and power capacity are going to be based on the size of the system. There are exceptions. I believe one of them would be if the calculation comes out that it's a system required smaller than 4 kilowatts, then you don't need to provide one. And if you don't need to provide a solar system, then you don't need to provide the energy storage system. Moving on to multifamily, there are now requirements for PV and energy storage systems for 4 stories or more. It's very similar to non-residential. And then if you are still building 3 stories or less, there's no energy storage system required at this time. But for single family homes, energy storage, they have to be energy storage system ready. And so What that looks like is I listed it here. I'm not going to run through it just because we're short on time. This is available in those pamphlets, but basically similar to being electric ready, we just have to be energy storage ready. Now, the last thing I'll mention is that our energy code amendments, which is also known as our REACH code, is no longer going to be in place because our all new electric ordinance will be effective starting January 1st as well. And many of the changes that are in the energy code are to make single family homes electric ready. But since we're requiring all electric, those are irrelevant to what we do here in the city. And so with 2 minutes left, I'll go ahead and open it up for questions.
Well, excellent, Mike. I really appreciate all that detail. And we're going to, make these slides available for all the participants. And we'll also the video of this roundtable discussion will be available on the website. So anybody that wasn't able to join us will be able to access the video and hear the discussion. I want to respect everybody's time. I know it's called a roundtable. We usually have time reserved at the end for open discussion. And so, and actually one of the things I really want to talk about with this group is the local economy and how some of the larger activities and issues that are occurring in the global and US economy are affecting us here locally. I have information that I'd like to share about permit activity and city revenue as it relates to doing plan check for public improvements and for building permits that I'd like to share with everybody as a basis for a conversation. So we're going to get back together for another roundtable without an agenda of presentations, but just to talk about the economy before the end of the year. So I look forward to that and hope you'll be interested in participating in that next session and look out for the invitation. So it's now 1 o'clock. I'm going to conclude this session. If you have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to send email and we'll be sure to get right back to you. And with that, thank you so much for your participation, and that'll conclude today's meeting.